Hello everybody, welcome to the fourth edition.
Yep.
Nick of the Mayor and I. I'm not great at pronouncing mayor actually, it's a funny word to pronounce, but anyway. So welcome to the fourth edition of the Mayor and I, with me, Lindsay Khan, speaking to Nick Buckley, MBE, mayoral candidate for Greater Manchester.
Yep.
Nice to see you, Nick. This is the fourth episode, and just to give again a background to the listeners, the idea here is that I'll raise topics with very little notice to Nick about things that I'm finding interesting in the press and in the papers, and Nick will give us his views on those things as we discuss them. So I've got a kind of bit of a strange one for you today, Nick.
Yeah.
So my sister-in-law and her husband were over at the weekend, and as all middle-class conversations gravitate to, we started discussing immigration and the small boats. And I think actually we were discussing it not because particularly they were hostile to immigration or the small boats, but because it's in the news so much.
Yeah.
So the conversation started, and of course I have my particular agenda and view, and as part of a gotcha, or I thought was a gotcha with her, I said, well, you know, what level of immigration would you like in this country? And I think you and I discussed this before, but apparently in 1975, 94% of the population in the UK was British white. And I think that percentage now is down to 74% or something, so 25% of the population is immigrants, whether it's legal immigrant or illegal, it doesn't really matter. So I said to her, well, what percentage of the population would you be happy to be immigrants and original British white? And just as a matter of interest, the British white, apparently the DNA of the British white, which is, this idea we're a mongrel nation isn't actually correct. The DNA, apparently they've checked it, goes back to pre-Roman times for the majority of British white people in this country. Of which I'm not, but my mother was. My father's an Indian. So I said, well, would you be happy with 50-50? And she said, yes, I'd be happy with 50-50. And then I said, well, what about 99% immigrants, 1% original British white? Would you be happy with that as well? And she said, yes, I'd be happy with that as well. At which point, I wasn't quite sure. I was thinking, I wish I had Nick with me here. Because I couldn't really marshal a really good objection to what she was saying, because she was saying, oh, you know, a homogeneous, lots of different cultures, lots of different restaurants of different things, all these things that immigrants bring to, and it was actually quite a good, not that she's you know, a skilled orator and anything like that, but it was actually, I couldn't actually find my argument to say that shouldn't be the case. So I thought, I know what, I made a note, I'll save this, and when I see Nick, I'll ask him the question, because actually it's a very valid question, isn't it? And maybe some of our listeners may actually get into these conversations and not have the argument. So I'm assuming there is an argument, but if there is an argument, I'd be very interested to hear your spin on this.
So the fact she had answers for you means she was repeating everything she's ever heard of other people. So these are the sayings, the words that people use, such as diversity is great, look at all the restaurants we've got. Well, is that all you think immigrants are? Someone new to provide you with different tasting food? We need immigration for our care system, which we spoke about last time. So is all immigrants can do, wipe old people's asses? So she's just repeating those mantras about why immigration and diversity is good. She's given it no thought. She's just repeating, just like you do in church with the Hail Mary, she's repeating what she's been told to repeat on those things. What we need to understand is it is human nature for some people, and it's a successful survival strategy to go along with what looks like the winning side. So at the moment in our country, diversity immigration is the winning side. All the politicians are for it, all the institutions are for it, and if you are not for it, you're on the outside. And the outside of any tribe, any ideology, any religion is a dangerous place to be. It's so dangerous that, let's give the Aztecs as an example. The Aztecs, parents were very happy sacrificing their babies and their children on an altar, having their hearts ripped out while beating and their blood dripping down the sacrifice stone down, and they had grooves where all their blood drained. That was an honour for those parents to sacrifice their child. So just because you think you're on the winning side doesn't mean what you're doing and saying is morally right. So we as humans can pick the wrong side because it's beneficial for our survival. And that's what life's all about, really, survival. Now, if you look over a couple of 100,000 years, it makes sense that that gene that makes you pick the winning side, that makes you sacrifice your children for you to survive, that gene got passed on because they were on the winning side of those particular issues.
Yeah.
So we have, over a long time, become, cowardice is a human trait, and I'm not saying that as a derogatory term. Cowardice saves your life. It gives you a chance to reproduce again. Most brave people in the world were slaughtered. And we don't even know their names. They were slaughtered without us even knowing their names. The people who stood up to Hitler, the generals who stood up to Hitler, got slaughtered. The people who stood up to Stalin and Lenin, slaughtered. So being brave is morally correct, but it can end your life a lot quicker and your genes don't get passed on. So that's why she's doing that. So let's go to her argument now of she'd be quite happy with 1% of the UK being British, white, British. Questions I would ask her would, so where did the English go? If you're Indian, you can go to India. If you're African, go to Africa. If you're English and there's nowhere left in this island for you, where do you go if you're English or you're British? So basically, you're picking other people ahead of your own tribe. And this is definitely a female trait, more though to a male trait, because female are more compassionate, more empathetic, more we all need to get along together. And they've been traits that have generated over, again, millennia, because women were at home cooking and looking after children, making sure that the families living in a tribe are all getting along, because you wouldn't want confrontation in the little village you're living in. So women developed those skills. That's where they were important. Men were out hunting, doing those things. So this is definitely a female trait. Hence why woke and a lot of these things have expanded now since the 60s, because since the 60s we've introduced women into the workforce at higher and higher and higher numbers. Nothing wrong with that per se. But when you introduce certain people, certain cultures, certain ideas into new places, those ideas, those cultures, those ideologies will rub off in those new situations they find themselves in. So, in a nutshell, that relative of yours was, first of all, was making sure she couldn't be accused of being racist. So, it doesn't matter how little white Brits are here, I don't get in trouble for that. But I get in trouble if I put a number on immigration. So 50-50, well, you're still a racist. Okay, you're still a racist. What about 99-1? Well, we could go further than that because I don't want to be a racist. So that fear of that word and being on the wrong side is making her pick short-term benefits for her and her family of survival. But if you take a step back, the long-term benefits for her survival are being diminished.
Right. But what is the argument against having, say, 50% immigrants and 50% British white? Is it just survival of the tribe?
Yes.
So...
It's survival of the tribe, survival of culture. It's the survival of your way of life.
So that's an interesting one, culture. I've heard that argument before. So I'm going to talk later about a guy called Peter Whittle, who you probably know.
Yeah, I know Peter.
New Culture, you probably know personally. New Culture Forum,
yeah.
And he's a very articulate, very learned guy, speaks beautifully, and he lives in London, but he's seeing the erosion of the culture in London. He talks about, but what is that culture that's been eroded? That's the question.
The best example I can give you...
I'm asking these questions so I can put my arguments forward going forward.
Best example I can give you, the best visual example I can give you was the funeral of Our Late Queen. Do you remember the queues in London? Wrapping round, where she was being laid in state of it. Virtually 99.9% all white people.
I didn't hear
Yeah, you just look at the pictures and,
Yeah.
you know, they would find somebody who was black or
Yeah.
Asian or something,
Yeah.
and the press would home in on them. But if you looked at the wider pictures and you look, white, because they're all white British.
Yeah.
And that's a good example of the culture of immigrants coming into the country, making their life here, having a good life here, law-abiding, tax-paying, decent people
Yeah.
who, on the majority, still do not feel completely connected to the country as their home, because it's not their homeland, it's their new home, still having connections and still having large feelings towards where they came from.
Yeah.
And that's shown to me with the death of the Queen, that we didn't have lots of the Asian community queuing up to pay respects to our dead Queen. Same with the black community, same with the African community. All these communities all stayed at home.
Yeah.
It wasn't their Queen. It just happened to be the chief exec of the hotel I'm staying in at the moment. That's how our country's treated, as a hotel. You can like the hotel, you can respect the hotel. It's just a hotel. Your home is somewhere else, and many people feel that. And another way of looking at this is what I think it was Norman Tebbit in the 80s said. As somebody who's talking about the Asian community, ask them what cricket team they support.
Yeah.
And we've got British-born people who are third, fourth generation in our country who say they're British and support Pakistan cricket team when they're playing against England.
Yeah.
Not only is that wrong, I find that really offensive.
But why? The question, because I'm looking for a slam dunk argument here. So, why does it matter if only the white British turn up for the Queen's funeral? Why does it matter? And I know lots of Indians or Pakistanis who support Pakistan, but are, as you say, tax-paying, law-abiding British citizens.
Yeah.
But their heart lies. I mean, my father, who came from Trinidad, in India, an Asian from Trinidad, but he supported the West. Actually, I think he did actually support the British team, but he liked the West Indian cricket team, which was a great team in the 70s. What I'm trying to put my finger on is why does it matter if instinctively I know. I understand it matters, but I can't articulate why it matters. So why does it matter if a British-born Indian Pakistani who's law-abiding citizen isn't a radical Islamist, is whatever he might be, supports Pakistan over the English? Why does that matter?
That's all around social cohesion. You only can have peace in a society where everybody is pulling the same way. Everybody feels that everybody has the same outcome.
Okay, so this is good. Yeah. I like that. So social cohesion.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I think we're moving into something I kind of understand now. So, are you saying if we have a whole bunch of a diaspora of all different types of religions supporting for different international teams, different countries, social cohesion starts to break down?
Because there's nothing there bringing us together as one nation.
Right.
So if we have your next door neighbour is Bangladeshi and supports a Bangladeshi cricket team, and your other neighbour is Jamaican and supports Jamaica in the football, whatever, what is it in your community where's your umbrella that you can all say we're all under this umbrella?
Yeah.
Because there isn't anything. So therefore you start, or subconsciously, you view those people as different from you. You're not really British because you support Jamaica, and that's quite true.
Yeah.
You are not the same as me, and if we went to war, I don't think you'd fight for this country, but you're quite willing to live here and take all the benefits of this country. And it starts sowing those seeds of distrust. Yeah. And the only way society gets along is that communal trust we have with each other, where we know, talking now, there's rules that keep us from talking. At no point am I worried you're going to hit me. Mm. And anybody I speak to in the UK, I'm not worried they're going to hit me, because I've made that judgment in this country that sort of violence unexpectedly doesn't happen.
Do you get that sense when you're talking to my wife? Because I know you and her disagree on quite a lot.
On everything. I don't get the impression she wants to hit me. I get the impression she wants to gag me and not hit me. But we're making those judgments all the time, and that's how we get along as society.
Yeah.
But if we get to a stage where you're not like me, I don't know what you think and you believe in, I don't know what you're going to do, therefore I have less to do with you, because for me to engage with you, it's complicated and it's hard work, because I'm always thinking all the time, should I say this, should I say that, how are you going to react? And it's easier for me not to engage you. Hence we start separating on different lines such as religion, race, and that always leads to tribal warfare. And tribal warfare comes around when resources are tight. When you're in the good times, who cares? We've all got enough, we can have a laugh and a joke, I don't mind you don't support anything. But when times are tight and the government is looking at dishing out money and you're going, why are they getting that money? Why are they getting more money than my group are getting money? This is favouritism. That's because they've elected their... And next thing you know, these are mini civil wars within society if we don't all pull in the same direction, and there isn't anything that holds us all together. That's why we created a nation state.
Yes. I think you've hit the nail, whether you did it deliberately or not, I think you've hit the nail right on the head. It's social cohesion and cultural cohesion, and the reason you need social cohesion and cultural cohesion is when you face an existential threat.
Yes.
So, for example, the Second World War, the social and cultural cohesion of Britain is what gave it the strength to fight the threat from Hitler and the other countries in Europe who are the Axis countries. And as you're saying this, I'm actually thinking what's happening now in London with the marches against Palestine, the anti-Israeli marches, all those things there. We've got a fractured society now, haven't we?
Yeah.
Where when even though the government is saying we're supporting Israel in this or whatever, you have masses of people out in the street. A lot of them, we believe, are Muslims or influenced by Islamist principles, and that is a manifestation of the high percentage of Muslims, Islamists in the country who want to take to the street. So in that situation, there is no social or cultural cohesion with the majority of the people in the UK, because the people who are out marching the streets, the pro-Palestinian marchers, have got a different agenda, haven't they, and a different belief system. So I think, and you made a very good point, when times are great, it doesn't matter. Yeah. But when times are tough, when you have to come together as a country, what happens then? Yeah. Because you're right, I think if there's a war now, I mean, we've got the Iran thing at the moment, haven't we, kicking off. If there was a war now, which I personally don't think there is going to be, but if there was a war, how many people would actually sign up to go and fight for this country?
Well, we've had that all over the news just last week.
Yes.
And it's hardly any.
Yeah.
Because we've become an individualistic society, so we only care about ourselves. And also we live in a society now where we don't think the government cares about us. So if the government doesn't care about us, why would we fight for a country that doesn't care about us? And then we're also now deciding who's the goodie, who's the baddie. We're not even looking at national interests anymore now. It's like, for me, in my community, who's the goodie, who's the baddie in this? Oh, the British are the baddie. Well, you live here.
Yeah.
And yet you can still decide the British government are the baddies in this conflict.
Yeah.
And we know where that's going to lead to. And a good example, a real life example is, with Second World War, America, Japanese internment camps. Suddenly at war with Japan, what the Americans do, round up a couple of 100,000 Japanese, lock them up in concentration camps. Why? We don't trust any of you because you've got loyalties elsewhere. What are we going to do if there was ever a world war and we're on the opposite side of Pakistan? Opposite side of some of the African nations? You know, are we going to go around and lock them up in internment camps? Because that's a distinct possibility, because what do you do?
That is a really good example.
What do you do when you feel that part of your country isn't on your side as a fifth element, not fifth element, a fifth column?
Fifth column, yeah. Oh, that's a really good example. I was watching a program about that the other day about because they built them in the middle of kind of New York and places like that. The actual camps where all the Japanese, and I'm sure most of the Japanese were perfectly law-abiding American citizens, but they just didn't want to take the risk, did they? Yeah, that's a really good example. I think that to me is a good argument. Social cohesion, cultural cohesion. If you don't have that, at times of danger, at times of stress, existential threat times, you've got a problem, haven't you?
I've got
Yeah.
one more answer to this,
Go on then.
which is a little bit white supremacy.
Yeah. I think there's the white supremacy thing coming
All
through
of it,
here
yeah, but
today, so
yeah.
that's fine.
But even this one is
Every
more
question.
so white supremacy. Cultures are different, aren't they?
Yes.
Every culture is different.
Yeah.
The fact they're different means you can rate them because there's differences. So you could stack them in a line of best to worst.
In terms of race or culture?
In cultures.
Yeah.
So
okay.
cultures. So,
Okay.
so you can stack
Yeah.
cultures best to worst.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
And every individual can do that.
Yeah.
Our lists may be different
Yeah.
depending on what you prioritise in
Yeah,
those
correct,
cultures.
yeah.
But the fact they're different means you can prioritise them.
Correct. Yeah.
So
I think that's fair. I don't think that's white supremacy.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not.
You've
No,
not
no,
got
that
it.
isn't the white supremacy
You've not
bit.
got
No.
to the white supremacy.
So if we can appreciate that cultures are different and you can rate them, then the next step then is why does the Western world and why does the UK specifically have a mass migration problem? Why are people from different cultures killing themselves to get here, paying criminals to get here? It's because they've made the judgment that our culture is better than their culture.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're trying to get here for a better life, and most of them get a better life. Now, where we let them down, they've met us halfway. They've already decided the UK culture is better than my culture in Zimbabwe, in Pakistan, in wherever. So I'm going to get there. They get here, and then we say to them, oh no, you're mistaken. Your culture is just as equal to ours. So therefore, keep your failing culture. That failing culture you ran away from and abandoned your family, your parents and your fellow citizens. That one you abandoned. Keep that failing culture and start it all again here. We're setting most immigrants up to fail in this country by allowing them to keep their own culture and making them believe their culture is as good as ours.
We're reinforcing it.
And it isn't.
Yes.
Ours is best. The fact they've come
Yeah.
here proves my point. Ours is the better culture.
Yes. And I believe our culture is the best in the world.
Yeah.
But a lot of British people don't believe that at the
No.
moment. But which is
we've
why
undermined
they
it.
are. Which is why I would imagine if I'd said to my sister-in-law, "Is our culture the best in the world?"
Should have said no.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that is tragic.
Yeah.
That's really sad that people, because I think you should be proud of your
Yeah.
own culture.
And the question then to her was, why?
Yes.
Tell me some other cultures and explain why they're better than ours.
Yeah.
Because she wouldn't be able to think
Yes,
of
I think you're right. I think she
Yeah.
would just spout that out again, going back to your
Yeah.
point, because tribally she's got to say this to survive,
Yeah.
basically. So.
But she wouldn't be able to back any
Yeah.
of those assertions
Yeah.
up. What culture are you talking about? That's better
Yeah.
than ours.
Was that your white supremacy bit?
Yeah.
Oh, that wasn't too bad.
Oh, good.
So just moving on to this, I think just in terms of the, I've kind of put my points, I think, in some sort of order, and we discussed this in the last conversation, and I've done a bit more reading around it, and there was a particularly interesting article by, it was either in the Telegraph or it might have been Spiked, it might have been something like that, and it was about something we covered last time, but really I kind of want to talk about it a bit more because I really want to ask you where this is going to end. And it's the impacts of Muslim identity politics, which is kind of what we've just been talking about now, on education and where will it end. So Tim Black wrote this very good article talking about basically how the promotion of Muslim identity politics has been. And he mentioned the Michaela Community School, which is where you know the headmistress, but also the Buckley Primary School, where the teachers banned any political messaging such as badges pro-Palestine, and they've been bombarded by the parents, predominantly Muslim parents. There's been bomb threats. There's been people.
And now they're talking about school may have to close.
School may have to close, and all this. What Tim Black is saying is, and we've just literally covered it a second ago, is under the guise of multiculturalism, basically, which is a concept that was introduced to this country probably, I don't know, in the 70s, 60s, 70s. And this is now how it's manifesting itself. Where will, if this isn't stopped, and maybe that is a white supremacy statement saying we need to stop this. This multiculturalism now, where will it stop, and where will it stop in education, do you think? Because it's becoming quite, it's starting to impact quite seriously already, isn't it?
So, when I was at school in the 70s, most of my friends were Asian, Pakistani descent. And I remember thinking at the time that I know you got to go to a mosque, but I reckon by the time you're an adult with your kids, you'd have stopped going to mosque. Just like what happened to the Christian community. Forced to church, and when they got older, no one's going to church now.
Yeah.
I thought that would all die out with the Muslim community in the 70s.
Yeah.
But because of mass immigration, more and more and more coming over, it hasn't died out. What we need to understand about the radical Islamists is they saw what the far leftists did with identity politics. And they saw all these tactics and went, we could use all them. So the Islamists culturally appropriated the far left's tactics on identity politics and created themselves as a race. They then saw the power that...
although they weren't a race, they were simply a religion.
A religion, yeah.
Yeah.
But then they saw the issues we tied out, the knots we tied ourselves in around black people and racism. So they wanted a piece of that as well. Hence we got, you're not allowed to say the word Paki anymore. The word Paki is what they called themselves when they came over here. Because they come from Pakistan. Pakistan means land of the Pakis. That's what they are. That's what they called themselves. But they wanted an N-word themselves. So they made that to become an N-word. Then someone invented the term Islamophobia, to replace the word racism. So they started stealing all those things to get power. And then talking about education per se and culture, there's two things happened here. Well, the first thing is we lost our nerve and we turned into cowards, and we didn't challenge people on their cultural failings. And what these individuals in this community need to understand is we have religious schools in the world. We have religious teachings in the world around Islam, and every single one of those countries is a failing country. So again, we've allowed people to come to the country and they want to change our education system, which is crap at the moment now anyway, but used to be better. But they want the same system they have at home, which is the failed state they've escaped from, to come here. And we need to say to them, no, that's wrong. You can have that, go to Pakistan, and that's what you'll end up with. But we don't want that here. But no one's brave enough to do it. And part of that I can understand, because Islam now it's a terrorist organisation to a certain extent. You upset the Islamists, you get, you're a fatwa, you get a fatwa put on your head, you get bomb.
Well, I've actually written down Salman Rushdie here.
Yeah, I mean,
Salman Rushdie, what happened to him, apart from the fact he got stabbed recently, but the fatwa itself, I think that was around the point that this all started.
Yes, it was.
I think, because up to that point, I don't think anything like that was really an issue.
No.
I don't think there was Muslim identity politics. I don't think it was. It had. When I was at school, I went to school in Leeds, Hare Hills. Any listeners who are from that area will know that's a very rough, multicultural, multi-race society. But there was none of this Islamic stuff happening then in the 60s. I can guarantee it. We didn't even know about it. There was no. I went to a multicultural school, secular school, multicultural, Indians, Muslims, Christians, and we all had to go to say our prayers in the morning and go to church and things like that. There was no even discussion about Muslims doing their prayers in the school and things like that. Then Rushdie happened. Yeah. When did Rushdie? Was it the 80s that Rushdie happened?
Was it early 90s? I think.
Yeah, it might have
been. Somewhere.
And I think then we started to realise actually there's a movement here, isn't there? There's something.
It was already here, and lots of people knew about it. So, in the 70s and 80s, this country started to allow radical Islamists from across the world to move here. Why? It was the Cold War, and we wanted them to help us fight the countries we were trying to fight. So we allowed, people from the Middle East and stuff to come here, who were then mounting campaigns against their home countries' regimes, and we found all that beneficial at the time. Cold War going on, and what these individuals did was they started radicalising the local populations, more immigration coming in, and all of a sudden we turned around and went, look at the mess we've made, especially London. Look at the mess we've got here now. We've got radical jihadists now living in our cities. They've not turned on us yet, but they will. And then the Salman Rushdie thing happened, and that should have been the point where the government and society said, no, we're not having this. But they got the opposite. We had British politicians, MPs on TV going, Salman Rushdie disgraced Islam, and if I met him, I'd take him down an entry and teach him some manners. It's like,
I remember that. I was quite shocked.
Yeah,
when
the radical Islamists then saw that cowardice and went, we're back for the taking now.
Yeah.
And every year we added more and more and more Islamists into the country through mass migration.
Yeah.
And we roll on now 30, 40 years. Hence why you've got hundreds of thousands of Islamists marching on the streets for free Palestine. It's a show of force. They don't care about Palestine.
No,
it's got nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
They're saying, we're here and we want some special rights, and you better start paying attention to us. And they are going down that path of revolution, being spurred on by the communists, the socialist worker, lunatics, Antifa. They're all together because you all want the same thing at the moment, which is a revolution. Once we get the revolution, most of these people will execute each other, and there won't be many of those original people left, and then we'll be a communist state.
And is that a real possibility, do you think, a revolution in this country?
No. We don't do revolutions. Things take time to change in this country. And that's why I say to people who want immediate change, if you can change this country overnight, it would be a basket case.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying it's perfect. We need change. We always should be tweaking the system we're in. But we can't have immediate change, because that means the next lunatics who come along and win the election, they'll vastly change everything. You can't have those things. We should be planning for the long term.
But if 25% of the population now are immigrants, which I think those numbers are right. Those numbers might be actually understated. It may be more than that now, because I think on the basis we've got a lot of people coming to the country and a lot of British people leaving the country as well. The 25% may be higher.
Well, Manchester, Birmingham, London, white English people now are minority in those three cities.
Yeah.
Manchester, Birmingham, and London.
I didn't know it was the case. I knew it was in London. I didn't know it was in
that white English.
White English.
White English. Yeah.
But why can't there be a revolution if there's 25% and growing?
Because they all hate each other.
Oh, right, because and even in the Muslims, I know there's a difference between the Sunni Muslims and the Shiite Muslims. That there's lots of.
I've stopped fights between Pakistani kids and Bangladeshi kids who are third generation here and are fighting over the 1976 war.
Yeah.
And it's like, you two couldn't even find countries on the map. Why are you fighting? So all these countries all hate each other. All these immigrants groups all hate each other.
So that works enough.
Yeah.
For I guess.
Look at the riots last year in Leicester. Indians and Pakistanis over a cricket match in India, rioting and trying to kill each other in this country.
That does work in our favour.
Eritreans fighting with the Somalians in London with machetes.
Yeah.
They all hate each other.
That's a good point. That's comforting, I suppose.
Yeah.
Not that they're all fighting each other, but that means they can't unify potentially to have a revolution.
No.
I mean, just what's interesting, and this leads into kind of my next point. You're very open in the way you speak now, and I suspect that people will comment on what you've been saying now, or even what I've been saying, because they will, like my sister-in-law, racist or whatever it may. You don't. Just by the way, that conversation then actually fed back into our original conversation about unlimited immigration, and another reason for not having unlimited. It's actually another argument, isn't it? What you were just describing.
Yeah.
That because what's happening in the schools now is a reason why you don't want unlimited immigration. Because once a lobby is built of a population of a size, things like that start to happen, don't they? And have been allowed to happen by this government as well. So that's another argument about, because it'd just be chaos in all the schools, wouldn't it? If we had unlimited immigration, all different people vying for their education system, their religion to be represented in the schools, in our principal institutions, that's when it will end up in chaos.
And the wider look at our housing problem is not about building enough houses. Our housing problem in this country is an immigration problem. Because the white British population is declining and has been for 50 years in this country. It's immigration that's keeping house prices so high. NHS appointments, dentist appointments. I couldn't get a dentist for 3 years, a couple of years ago, up to last year. And by the time I found one and got one, they had to take my tooth out. Could have been saved a couple of years earlier. You look at all these problems and it's because of mass immigration.
Yeah.
Also then look at the cultural differences. The way certain cultures treat women. Nearly all the rapes going on in the country, stranger rapes at the moment, seem to be immigrants. Look at the knife crime issues we've got at the moment. They're imported issues.
Yeah.
No, we've had knife crime problems in this country in the past, but we dealt with them.
I think the knife crime thing is a West Indian thing.
And African.
Yeah, an African. And the reason I say that is my dad from Trinidad, I think I've told you before, wherever we moved, he always had a machete.
Yeah.
And I used to say,
it's a cultural thing.
I used to say to him, where do you get a machete in England? And he would be very mysterious about it. But whichever house we lived in, there would always be a machete.
Yeah.
And when I went to Trinidad to see my relatives when I was a kid, they've got machetes everywhere and knives
and that
everywhere.
goes right back to cultural cohesion.
Yes.
When you don't understand what your neighbours are going to do,
Yeah.
you better have a machete.
Yes. No, I think it was. I mean, I think you need one in Trinidad.
Because you don't trust each other.
Yes. You need a machete.
Yeah. People think the Caribbean is lovely, peaceful.
No.
It is for tourists, 5-star hotels. Jamaica, I don't know about the other countries, but I would imagine they're roughly the same. Jamaica is probably the most dangerous place in the world.
Yeah.
Over the last 50, 60 years, it's always been in the top 3 dangerous places in the world. The only time it's not number 1 is when there's like a war in the Congo.
Yeah.
And then Congo becomes number 1.
Yeah.
But Jamaica is an extremely dangerous place.
Yes, it is. No, and Trinidad is as well. I mean, Trinidad's a beautiful island.
Yeah.
It's not a holiday destination because it's the murder rates are really high.
Yeah.
It's a very dangerous environment. So
because their culture's different.
Yeah, and it's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
I say my father's an Indian, so it's not a racial thing because he culturally was a West Indian and he was a tough guy, a very tough guy, and not. You generally get the sense that the Indians are relatively, calm or peaceful. He was quite.
He wasn't.
Yeah, he wasn't. But I think it was a cultural thing. I think he'd been raised that way, in a very tough environment in Trinidad. So as I say, you speak very. I just want to kind of move on to kind of free speech now, really, and talk about free speech. You speak very openly, very candidly about things, and will. Probably get barracked occasionally by some of your listeners or viewers or whatever as a result of it. And I think, but even you limit what you say. So when you were going to talk about before, you said, I'm going to say about white supremacy now, even you were almost starting to hold yourself back or recognising what you're saying may be perceived by the general population to be not acceptable, whatever that is. So there was a very interesting article about self-censorship studies, basically, and they did 2 studies, one in America and one in Germany, on asking people the question: do you feel that you have to be careful about certain things that you talk about now? So the one in the US, they originally did this survey in 1954, and these numbers are quite staggering to me actually. In 1954 in the US, 13% of people believed that they had to be careful about what they said. They had to be guarded about what they said. The number now, 2023 I think it was, sorry, so it's not 20, but last year's survey, 46% people, so which is a staggering number. 50%, nearly 50%, half the people in the US believe they have to be careful about what they say in certain conversations. They did the same thing in Germany, which we'll assume has a representative of the European side of it. They could only go back to 1990 in Germany because of the reunification period. And so 1996, 16% believed they had to be careful about what they said. And then now 44%. So again, nearly half the population in Germany. And you and I were talking about this last time, and you said, there's always certain things that one can't talk about. But what this is saying is, yes, there are certain things, but the percentage and the amount of things that people can't talk about has tripled since 1990 or whatever it is. And do you think, because I think you were quite not blasé about it last time, but you said, we always have to censor what we say. But we're censoring a lot more now.
We are, but there's some reasons for that, apart from just the fact that we have to self-censor. So one of the reasons is social media. So you've got more opportunities now to voice your opinion that you
Yeah.
never had 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have had to watch what you said because all you was ever talking to was your friends and you could be honest with them. Now you've got social media where we all have to watch what we say. So people are more aware now of having to self-censor.
Yeah.
So that will make up some of those numbers.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Also, we're in a culture war at the moment, which means, you know, we're almost 50-50 of people on either side of this. And because of social media, because of businesses now are so involved in our lives, your employees so involved in your life, you're scared of losing your job. We've had these issues before, such as a business would say, we're not employing Roman Catholics. And we had laws passed to say to businesses, their religion's got nothing to do with you. If they turn up and do a good day's job and you pay them, that's the end of your involvement in that person's life. We've lost that now. So now business is going, because you support X and Y in your own time, we're going to discipline you at work, that you've never said those things at work. In fact, we're going to sack you. So things have got worse, absolutely. But I think a lot of it is technology driven.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very good point, that people are now scared to say things outside of work that they used to, and they sort of understood at work, you know, I can't call that guy an N-word because I'll get in trouble or whatever. But when they went to the pub, they would say the N-word with their friends or whatever. I remember when I started out in I was originally an engineer, and I started out my career, and I must have been my mid-20s. I was walking around with a perfectly nice chap, and he suddenly used the N-word describing, we were walking through Hume, and he said an N did this or whatever the other day, and I was really shocked. But he wasn't concerned about self-censoring at that point. I mean, this is going to be the mid-80s or whatever. But so people now are scared to say things outside of work and in work as well, which is, so there's an awareness now, far greater awareness of what you're saying is, you know, can be dangerous. And I think people are actually scared if they say something in a pub that they will, you know, that potentially that could be overheard. That could then go back to their work or whatever it might be as well. Yeah. By the way, Rob the American was telling me what he was discussing 9/11. Yeah. But he said he was discussing 9/11 in a positive way. But the actual thing that they
in a positive way.
Yeah, he was saying he'd unified the America. Yeah. But then I think they were talking about BLM after that, and that's when the police were called. Right. When they were expressing their views on BLM in the pub that time, basically. So he was discussing that in the pub. Somebody overheard next door, police were called or whatever. But I mean, that's a massive increase, up to 50. So we're saying every 1 in 2 people out there are scared of saying things to other people. Are self-censoring themselves, holding back.
Probably rightly to do so, to a certain extent. Now the question is, what happens if they carry on doing it? Well, things get worse.
Yes.
At some point, people have to make a stand and go, no more.
Yeah.
And should do it on a valid point, not on the M-word, not on something like that. If the valid point is, and that's what I do now, I speak my mind now as politely as I can.
Yeah.
I never used to when I was, before this part of my life now, political, when I ran my old charity. There was many things I wanted to discuss online and didn't, because I thought, this might affect funding to the charity.
Yeah.
And you can see it with lots of people in the business world. And business people I speak to say, Nick, I love everything you say, but I'm not going to say it on LinkedIn because I want contracts off such a company and this company. And on LinkedIn, I've had comments on some of my posts on LinkedIn. There was one woman I remember saying, I find it really useful, Nick, to look at who likes your comments on your posts, because I'm going to make sure I never do business with them. It's like, so you can understand why some people are nervous, because people need to make a living, people need to earn a living, but this culture war needs winning. That's how we get rid of it. It needs.
But did she not understand the irony of what she was saying there?
No.
This is a person who is studying free speech responses to people, and then as a direct result of that is cancelling those people.
Yeah.
And they don't understand how pathetic and stupid that is when they do that.
Because if you're not on her side, you're a Nazi.
Yeah.
And that's that simplistic thinking we've got going on in our communities
Yeah.
across the country. Is there's only two sides, right and wrong, good and evil, light and dark.
Yeah.
I'm obviously amazing. I'm obviously,
Yes.
I'm like Gandhi, Mandela, and
Yeah.
I'm one of them people. And if you don't agree with me, it's obvious. You're Hitler.
Yeah.
Obvious. And who wants to do business with Hitler?
Yeah.
Apart from Coca-Cola and Boss and Mercedes.
Oh,
Yeah.
so self-censorship, moving on from that, there was again another very interesting article in the Telegraph about the Globe Theatre in London, and this is an example where something has happened and there's been immediate pile-on, and then they've got to then defend themselves. And then you kind of think, well, you can understand why people are self-censoring, because once this environment is in place where anything you say or do is critiqued and analysed and dissected, it's very I think this is very interesting for a number of reasons. So Richard III, the Shakespearean play, obviously the protagonist is Richard III, who, as we know from the portrayal by Laurence Olivier, various other actors over there, but famously Laurence Olivier, was a hunchback
I can
king.
an impression of him.
Okay.
Now. That's it.
That's very
That's
good.
5 seconds.
That's got to be posted. So Richard III is a man, but a hunchback man. You don't see many hunchbacks these days. I'm sure I saw a lot more when I was a kid. So the Globe Theatre, obviously being inclusive and diverse or whatever, has cast a woman as Richard III, which actually, and if, by the way, I was thinking about this, if you go back 20 or 30 years, we were doing that before all the DEI thing. Women were being cast in men's role in various plays around, and there was no issue with that at all. I don't think there was.
There was. That was the beginnings. That was the beginnings of the wokery.
Yeah, I remember that, and I don't remember even thinking anything about it. But I may have been.
Yeah.
I may have been at that point captured fully, so I don't know. I'm definitely not now. But when it happened then, I didn't even think anything about it. But I was probably a liberal left winger at that point. So they've cast a woman as Richard III. Fine, you and I as liberal, maybe you're not fine, but I'm fine about that. But they've been pilloried because the woman they've cast is not disabled.
Yeah.
So she isn't a hunchback. So it's not that she's a woman being cast, it's the fact that she's not a disabled woman.
Yeah.
So they've been attacked by disabled actors around this, and they've had to defend themselves. And part of their defence is saying they are inclusive or whatever. But whatever. So this to me, is insanity, because it's not the fact she's a woman, it's the fact she's not a disabled woman.
You can't do enough.
Yeah.
You can't do enough. First thing, Richard III wasn't a hunchback in real life.
Right. Okay.
That was,
as we can tell from your impression.
Yes, that was propaganda at the time, and it was given credence by Shakespeare, who wrote the character as a hunchback, but in real life he wasn't a hunchback. Makes no difference. The Globe Theatre is a lovey-dovey, artsy, far left. All the arts.
It's incredibly woke.
The whole arts industry
woke.
is.
Yeah.
And they can't be enough woke.
Yeah.
To for other people to appreciate him the way they want to be appreciated, because there's always more you can do.
Yes.
That woman, was it a white woman?
A white woman. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
So the racist anyway.
Yes, the racist.
So employing a white woman. Yeah. They should have got a black lesbian in a wheelchair with blue hair and Maori face tattoos. That's what Richard III really
Although
looked like.
somebody would have complained because she wasn't a hunchback, just in a wheelchair, because you need the hunchback.
No, but she identified as one.
Oh, right, okay.
Yes,
fine. Yeah,
yes. Yeah. Her pronouns were hill and hump. So, yes. But you can't do enough. They're always looking for something to attack those organisations on, because they know they'll get away with it. They know the globe will panic. They know the globe will go, oh, but tell you what, We'll do more for disabled people. Would you like a grant? Do some of you want to get a job here? It's all power dynamics all the time.
Yeah.
And if you dance with the devil, you've got to pay the toll eventually. And these people have been dancing with the devil, and you can't do enough for them. And eventually that snake eats itself.
Yeah.
And hopefully they'll eat the globe.
Yeah. So but this idea now in and acting's a big, films, theatre, acting is a massive part of our lives. But this idea of casting people who have the disabilities or whatever. So there's been various apologies. For example, Eddie Redmayne. I can't remember the name of the film.
Coward. He's a coward.
Yeah. So Eddie Redmayne made a film where he played a transvestite.
Tom Hanks in the AIDS film, he said he wouldn't play that now.
Yeah.
All these people are cowards.
But surely this, for me, this isn't right.
That's what acting is.
Yes.
Acting is to get someone.
Yeah.
And with their skill, they pretend, just like trans people, they pretend that they're someone else.
Yeah.
And that's called acting.
Yeah.
And I've come to the conclusion about the why actors fall for all this and are so woke is because basically they're empty vessels.
Yeah.
They haven't got a personality. They haven't got any of that. That's what makes them a good actor.
Correct. Yeah. The problem with acting, and it's the same with musicians as well, at the end of the day, actors, performers, they're performers.
Yes.
Singers are performers. But somehow the public seems to imbue them with intelligence or capability in political nous because they are successful in these particular things. But you're right, most actors speak other people's words.
Yes.
Most of them have got no idea. I mean,
they get told what to do, where to stand, when to speak, what to wear.
Yeah. Ricky Gervais made that point at the Globes, didn't he? He said most of you haven't even been to school, so let's not pretend that you know what you're talking about. But they get incredible power, incredible wealth, and then they just spout absolute nonsense. But I think the interesting thing about this is you and I have talked about meritocracy before and how positive discrimination actually can undermine the ability to get the best brains. We talked about Harvard last week or whatever, the fact that they're now using positive discrimination. So they're not getting the brightest students, they're getting the appropriate ratios of whoever their students might be. Does this mean, and I think it's already happening because there's very little I can watch on television now, does this mean we're going to end up with just absolutely crap television and films?
Look, we're there, aren't we?
Yeah.
We've been there for a long time.
Yeah.
The last thing I tried to watch, I think it was the BBC. It wasn't BBC, it was ITV. And it was a couple of years ago, and somebody was saying it was good. I thought, got nothing else to watch. I'll watch that. So I got iPlayer, and I looked at it, and I found it. And I think I got 20 minutes into it. It was about the British submarines in the UK. And it was a spy drama or something. And the 4 heads of the submarine department in the Royal Navy, whatever it is, it was 2 women, a black man, and a white man. And I'm like, I'll put money on there's no black men at the top of the submarine division. I'll tell you what, there's no women there either. And it's like, and that straight away spoilt it for me. It was like, this is pathetic. And then it's like, they're placements, they're just tokens.
Yes. Yeah.
And I see it all the time now, and it puts me off. I've just watched something with my wife, which I didn't really enjoy. But you start watching evening TV. She can't watch all the rubbish I watch. So we watched it together. Series called The Winter King.
Right.
It's a retelling of King Arthur.
Right.
Yeah, Merlin's black. His best friend is a black man with a Jamaican accent. He does a deal with this other tribe, and he's Asian with an Asian accent. And they're training these fighters because they're going to war. Half the fighters are women. And I'm like, I can't. I carried on watching it. I watched them all, but I played it on my phone throughout it. And it's like, you're ruining these stories. If you want a story where there's a black wizard and half the women are the warriors, well, write a story for that.
Yeah.
Stop taking our heritage, our myths and legends, like Snow White, what Hollywood are doing, and wasted $500 million. Stop taking.
They scrapped it, actually.
Stop taking our culture and ruining our culture. Create your own stories.
Yeah.
Like Star Wars created their own stories. Harry Potter created new stories. You don't have to keep ripping off.
But I don't think it's black people or Asian people who are doing this.
No,
I think
no.
it's white people.
Yeah.
I think it's white
white
people who are saying we must cast a black person.
Yes.
I mean, it's Doctor Who's a recent example, isn't
Yeah.
it? So in Doctor Who now, and it is strange, very strange, they have a transvestite playing the Doctor's assistant, a man.
Yeah.
But it's not only, so he's a black man
Yeah.
playing a woman, but worse than that, it's a black adult man playing a young woman, like a 15-year-old
Oh, I
woman.
didn't know
But
any of
he's
this.
about 23,
Yeah.
this guy.
Well, this is all LGBTQ,
Yeah,
isn't
yeah.
it?
So you've got a transvestite, a man, a male transvestite, playing like a 14-year-old
Yeah.
doctor's assistant.
Yeah, it's not creepy at all, is it?
Well, yeah, no, it's yes, sorry, yes,
Yeah.
I know your sarcasm, and you're right, it's very creepy.
Yeah.
I think that's incredibly creepy. But this is for children,
Yeah.
this basically.
And
So,
and you change a country and a culture by indoctrinating the children.
but the person who wrote Doctor Who is a white middle-aged man.
Yeah.
He's called Russell. Is it Russell T Davies? It's
Something
Russell.
like that, yeah.
It's Russell T Davies.
Yeah.
So you got a white middle-aged man, and I'm assuming a whole bunch of white producers and
Yeah.
directors casting a black. The fact the character's black is fine. It's not, but the fact it's a black transvestite man pretending to be a young black girl is
Yeah.
really creepy. But
I've not
promoted by white
Yeah.
middle-aged men.
We can all see it when it's done as a box ticking exercise.
Yeah.
If that play at the Globe and Richard III, if they got, what's he called? Denzel Washington to play that, I would not be thinking that was a box ticking exercise. Denzel Washington
Yes.
is one of my favourite
Agree,
actors.
agree.
I don't think he's ever done a bad film.
Yeah.
And some of my favourite films of all time are
Yeah.
his films. He's just excellent. And
Yeah.
I could see him playing Richard III.
Yeah.
I think he just played Hamlet or something on a,
Yes,
on a
I think
film.
you're right. Yeah. No,
I've got an issue with that.
and actually
it's
there-
when you know they've been shoehorned in because of that.
Yes, and there is actually a history in British theatre of great black actors playing white Shakespearean roles, and as you say, I've never raised an eyebrow. And so the actual concept of a female woman playing Richard III isn't an issue for you.
Yeah.
Maybe more of an issue for you. It's not an issue for me.
So I mean, this because I know that's why they picked her.
It's the fact they have been attacked because she's not disabled,
Yeah.
and that there's
They made a mistake. She should have been a black woman
yes, and then
Because-
nobody would have said anything.
because disabled people
Yeah.
won't go up against a black.
And by the way, in defence of black actors, I think black actors must be rubbing their hands together at the moment because there must be so many roles now for black actors, people in in commercials. There's so many, as you know, every
Yeah.
3 out of 4 commercials now just have black people.
Yeah.
If you came to this country from a spaceship and sat down and watched the TV
Yeah.
and saw the adverts, you'd think you were in an African country basically. Because so many of the but good luck to them because I bet the black actors agencies or whatever it is must be raking in the moment. And as a black actor, your chances of getting a job are probably really high.
They are.
So I don't blame them for taking advantage. Because you and I have discussed this before.
Yeah.
Take advantage. People take advantage of their
You only
situation.
can play the system you're in.
Yeah.
And they've not created this system. They're
Yeah.
in this system. It will be a backlash for them, so they need to be careful because
Yeah.
what we're doing now, and this conversation proves it, we're now saying black people only get roles because they're black.
Yes. Yeah.
And some of those actors will be amazing actors.
Yeah.
And they're going to be tarred with the same brush.
Yeah.
And then people now have stopped watching these movies and some of these programs because you see it and you go, that's going to be rubbish.
Yeah. There's no doubt.
They're damaging the industry
I'm now
themselves.
turning off films
Yeah.
if I see there's a black role or a whole bunch of black actors there
Yeah.
that if it's a historical drama
Yeah.
or whatever, and I just go, well, yeah, but there weren't any black people
Yeah.
around at that time,
Exactly.
and the chance of the black person being in that position
Yeah.
at that time would be. But this has been going on for a long time.
Yes.
Because do you remember Starsky and Hutch
Yeah.
in the 70s? The captain,
Yeah.
the authority figures in a lot of those programs in
Yeah.
the 70s were black, and I didn't even see it then.
Yeah.
But they were doing it then, weren't they? They were putting black people in very senior positions on the television.
That depends on, we would have to look at the stats or those police departments to see.
Yeah, maybe there were black captains.
Yeah. So
at that time.
there may have been.
Yeah.
Just not in this country at that time.
So just on that finishing on that article. So, are you aware of the term blacking up? So when an actor blacks up
Yeah.
to look like a black, but obviously it's not allowed anymore. It's
Yeah.
just not. But apparently disabled have got a term for when a non-disabled person, and it's called crippling up.
Yeah.
Have you heard that one?
No. But I know they're not happy with it, but I just didn't know they come up with it.
So they call it crippling up when an able-bodied actor pretends to play somebody disabled. And just going back to Eddie Redmayne, in the film he was in, he actually portrayed that transvestite when he was living as a man, a woman. But I don't understand why that couldn't be allowed then, because he had to play a man at one point, didn't he? So that again didn't make any sense to me. Because if the transvestite had the role, they would have had to play a non-transvestite at the beginning of the film, wouldn't they? So they would have been... Anyway, that's a separate story.
If you like that video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell and comment. And if you like what I'm saying about running for Mayor of Greater Manchester, then stick around, tell your family, tell your friends. The only way I'm going to have a chance of winning is a grassroots movement. So be part of that movement and hit that bell. Thanks.